Welcome to CAE Pilot Podcast, a podcast that brings together aviation professionals to discuss life as a pilot, training, and career advice. You can find us at cae.com/CAE Pilot-podcast or subscribe to our show on your audio podcasting platform of choice. You can also find our video podcast on our YouTube channel.
So welcome to this edition of the CAE Pilot Podcast. My name is Patrick Botter, and I am thrilled today to have Sophie Blanchard with us. Now, there are certain aircraft that ignite our imagination. And I'm thinking of aircraft like the Concorde, the 747, and of course, the most recent addition to that fine trio is the A380. And Sophie is an A380 pilot, and we're thrilled to have you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. That's very nice of you. I'm still actually a 380 pilot, captain actually. Yeah.
So I won't ask you, like among Av geeks, right? You're either Team 747 or Team A380. But I won't ask you which one you are.
Yes. By my accent, I'm a pro Airbus.
I was going to say, especially that you're in Toulouse right now, of course,
yes.
where Airbus
I've been flying Airbus. I flew just 2 years Boeing, but really Airbus is my thing.
Yeah, in my career as a flight attendant, the A320, the A330 are really the aircraft that I enjoyed flying the most. I'd never flown on an A380, funnily enough. But funny story, maybe to start off, is as a guy who's been in aviation for so many years, I always sort of laugh at people who sit at the end of the runway to watch aircraft land. And where I am in Montreal, just before landing in Dorval, you come over this one on-ramp to the highway, where you're just a few feet above the runway at that point. And I was coming off the highway and was saying, oh my God, look at all these people who are checking this out. Like, what amateurs, you know? And then the A380 was there a few feet from me. It felt like a few feet. I started honking my horn. I went bananas. I was so happy to see it, you know? So it was a rare sighting in Montreal at the time. So it was so exciting because I think you can't help but look at that aircraft in particular and say, oh my God.
That's amazing. Every morning when I was driving my son to school, I was on time, then the 380 was just landing and just the same. I was on the highway. You cannot stop watching, you know? It's like kind of dangerous actually, but massive, so massive from outside.
But tell me what it's like to be, to take control of this aircraft. I mean, it's one thing to see it in the air and it's beautiful in terms of a piece of machinery, but what was it like the first time you walked into the flight deck and sat down in the left seat and took control? It must have been quite a feeling.
Actually, the inside the cockpit, it's like a 340 or 330. You know, Airbus, they all build the cockpit kind of the same. No, the most impressive is when you just about to board the aircraft, you know, and you look at that big plane and you're like, no, am I going to fly this big stuff, you know? And the thing is that because the cockpit is a bit higher, I mean, much higher than the other one, you're like overviewing the whole airport, you know? It's kind of amazing. And the cockpit is really modern, you know, more screen, and it's not the 350 yet, but it's a big transition from the 330. So it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing machine. Now, maybe we'll step back a bit, but tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, how you got the bug for aviation.
It's a long time ago. Actually, I was lucky to have a stepdad who was in aviation already. So we made a deal when I was 16, I think. He said his dream was to have a kid to be a pilot, you know. So he said, okay, you can go to America, you will learn how to fly, you come back and you work for me. So that was just perfect. So I went there straight after I finished high school. So I flew the small aircraft, just, you need 250 hours for commercial. I had 251.3, and straight I went back to Europe to fly that DC-8, was my first plane, DC-8-55, which is not even the most modern one. And that was an African company, but based in Belgium. So I started flying straight away. I just did, in America, actually, you can, for a three-man cockpit, you can fly as a first officer on a commercial pilot. So just a few items to do in the simulator, not a full type rating. So I did that and went straight flying, first flight to Angola, I think, if I remember, that we had to divert because Brazzaville airspace was closed, and we ended up in Centrafrique, and oh la la. That was straight in the job. So DC-8, and then I flew for 2 years. Then I went to Switzerland to do my European license, ATPF. And then I got a job on Boeing, for Boeing 767 for 2 years, for that Belgian company. Ended up on the cargo plane, back on the Airbus, first time, sorry, on the Airbus 300, 600. And then 9/11 came, bankrupt. And then I was hired by a cargo company from Iceland, on the 300, 600 again, and flying for many airlines like Air France. We were flying ACMI, which wet lease. Mm-hmm. So Air France, that's how I ended up actually in Middle East, flying there. And then I was hired for the national carrier of UAE.
So you mentioned that you ended up in 2007 in the Middle East, and then just 3 years later, you hit what I think is a significant milestone and personal achievement. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I was already captain before going to I was really lucky, because I started flying at 18. I was the first time upgraded at 23 on the 300, 600. And when I joined the UAE carrier, they took me as first officer for 3 years. And then they upgraded me on the 330 as captain. And that was a big stake, especially in this part of the war, to be a female captain. They advertised as I was the first one in UAE. So that was quite fun, challenging, I would say.
And it's interesting because here you are in the Middle East, and you're taking this huge step in terms of equality and diversity, and all of the things I think that we talk about today. So what was it like to be the first female captain at your airline?
Actually, they were really helpful. They during anyway, the first time when I joined, they told me the same thing. We are supporting you. If you have any remark because you're a female, we will be behind you. You should not accept that. This is not acceptable at all. When I was upgraded, that was kind of showing the world that they are open-minded as well. So I had no problem. It was because I was captain before, was expecting maybe, jealousy or something like this. Nothing at all happened. The cabin crew, they were so proud to fly with a female captain. Oh, that was fantastic.
And did you feel a sense of responsibility in any way towards, female pilots in general, perhaps within the airline as well?
Of course, I was kind of a leader, because there was some female first officer, and I needed to prove, that it's working well, it's feasible, and one day that will be your turn as well. So that was kind of a big responsibility, despite the fact of being the captain on the aircraft.
And I would imagine you also became a huge role model, both with the pilots at the airline, But also, we saw it a little bit with the U.S. Vice President, with Kamala Harris. There was a lot of people who said, now that we've seen a woman become Vice President, I no longer have any limits on what I can do, right? Did you feel that same thing when you were, say, walking through an airline, or had a little girl who was, maybe a passenger on your flight, who saw you and sort of had that look in her eyes like, wow, there's someone who I can, I can be an airline pilot if she can?
But it's even some, where the Shera, which are the like royal family, some I had passenger, woman, female passenger, they came and congratulate me. They say that that's amazing what I did, and where I was the pride of the woman in UAE. That's, like you said, everything is feasible. We can do it. We can do it.
I mean, especially in the Middle East, right? Where, we've seen that women have just started to gain, in some countries, rights, like being able to drive. Now, obviously, the UAE is much more progressive, but it must have been a very proud moment, as you said, for yourself in attaining that, in that space, in that place.
Yeah. They did a lot of advertising, they put my face on the newspaper everywhere, even in Saudi. And they were, it was a pride for the country as well. So.
And how did men, both maybe pilots that you worked with, or you said that it was really a bigger deal within the country even, how did men react to it?
There's a lot of different nationality flying in those airlines in the Middle East. So the European people, American, Australian, they're kind of used to have women in the cockpit. All the Arabs, actually, they were really nice, and they were carrying my suitcase sometimes. They were bringing me coffee or sweets, and I tried to tell them, I'm a woman, I don't eat sugar. Not in public, actually. But they kept on giving me, those people, they always give you gifts and stuff. So they always come on board with a little chocolate, with all kind of sweetness. It was amazing, actually, really nice.
Did you take that as a sign of respect?
Of course. Yeah.
Because some people might say, at times, like, a man will hold the door for a woman or something along those lines. And I sort of see carrying the suitcase maybe along the same lines. But, I know when I hold the door, it's a sign of respect. It's not anything other than that. Is that the way you took those gestures?
Yeah, no, of course. They wanted to show some respect because I was the captain. So I was their boss on board. But we still have to work together. So, they just, I guess, wanted to show me that they will respect me. I'm trying not to be a woman on board. That's the point. That's what I was always say to everybody. They say, oh, it's hard to be a woman on board. I said, no, on board I'm a pilot. I'm a woman in life, but on board I'm a pilot. So I try not to behave. I'm not doing my nails during the flight. But they wanted to show me that there was no problem. There was equality. And they did that good, really.
We recently talked to Teresa Claiborne, who was the first Black female pilot in the U.S. Air Force. And today she's a captain at United Airlines and one of only 13 Black female women who are captains at that airline. And one of the things that she told us was, the way that I proved myself was being a good pilot. And did you find that sort of the same experience, that you showed that you were, as you said, a pilot on board, and you were simply a good pilot because you did your job exceptionally well?
Yeah, there's always a kind of a competition, because, between men, they always want to show I'm the best. the strongest and everything. With women, it's different. And people told me, you will have to be even better than men because they will criticize you. For me, I said, when I upgraded, I knew everything by heart. So I said, if somebody comes and asks me a question, I will be able to answer it. There will be no doubt that as a woman, it's not because I'm a woman or I was nice with somebody or, something like this, like everybody can think about. So that was it. I proved myself. Ask me the question, I can answer. So that was much more easy this way. But of course, before that, I had to work maybe more than a month. Let's say that like this, to keep quiet.
And another thing Teresa talked to us about was being in the crew room as an example and, being briefed, having someone come up and talk to the first officer because he's a man, sort of briefing him on something rather than her. And she said she would sit there and watch and then when it came time, say, oh, well, now you can brief me, I'm the captain. Did you ever have situations like that? And how did you deal with them?
Of course, I had that. The wars, I had that when I was flying the cargo, because cargo, it's another war. When you enter a plane with cabin crew, there's already female on board. But in a cargo plane, it's kind of, especially in Africa, or, it's not the most cleanest operation you can imagine. And some ground personnel, they just came on board. They didn't want to talk to me. And the problem is that the first officer answered them to the point that they need a signature. And the signature can only come from the captain. So the guy, he just gave me the paper, even not looking at me, but he had no choice. That was.
How did you take that? Like, how did you?
I took it like funny, because what can you do? This is the mentality. So if this person is thinking like this, what can I change? And I have no time to explain to him. He can see me in the seat, the left seat with a uniform. He should understand that I'm flying the plane. I'm not there just to be pretty, So if he cannot understand that from the beginning, that's it, For me, it's funny. But there is some planes that I cannot even go out of the plane, to do the walk around. It's not possible.
And you haven't picked, or maybe picked is the wrong word, but you haven't worked in the easiest of places either, right? So your experience in the Middle East was a good one, but when you go to Africa and whatnot, there are places where gender rules are still massively traditional and they're not as progressive as we like to think we are, in the West.
Especially I've been to airports in Africa, like nobody would ever go, bringing that cargo there. I remember once we had to stay 1 week in Kinshasa. And during that whole week, I met some other pilots and they asked me if I wanted to go with what was that plane? 580, I can't remember the name. Anyway, I went to a tiny little airport called Chikapa. And they said on the radio that a female pilot was coming, I was just a passenger, but I was in uniform just to observe the flight. And when I came, the whole village was there waiting for me just to see a female pilot. And they were like, oh, fantastic, there's a female pilot. They could not believe that exists, That was nice. That was an experience.
But having lived in Africa myself and knowing that some of the roles are different, I can only imagine the looks of some of the girls as well, because you must have changed their world completely, right? You must have just broken, their heads must have exploded when they saw you, right? Because in their mind, their idea of what a woman does, which in many ways may simply be to be a mother, a wife, and all of those things, and have a very traditional role, and all of a sudden, here's someone who flies an airplane, travels the world, all of these things that they can't dream of.
Mm-hmm. But, even in Europe, when I was after the 9/11, when my company bankrupt, I was looking for a job and I just had my daughter, my first child. And I had a chief pilot from one company, I can't remember the name. And he asked me, okay, what is your situation? I said, I just had a baby, you know, and that was in Italia. And the chief pilot told me, but you should not be flying. You should stay home with your baby. And I told him, I need to feed my baby. I need to have a job. And that's the only thing I can do. And I didn't get the job. Unbelievable. Some people, even in Europe, they don't know. You're a woman, you need to stay home.
Are you surprised, though, at the speed with which things have changed? And maybe from your perspective, it hasn't been as quickly as it should have been. But when I was a flight attendant, I started in 1996, which, you know, I suspect puts us more or less in the same age range. And like people who flew the like old guys with white hair flew the 747. We had female first officers and female captains, but they were few and far between. Enough so that you would really notice it when you were flying with a female captain or first officer. And then when I started doing this podcast, I was in business aviation for a little while after I was at the airline. And then when I started doing this podcast last year, the first person we interviewed was someone who flew the 747, and she was late 20s, early 30s, I would suspect. And maybe it's because the gap in my time, I was just so amazed at how times had changed that, you know, that these phenomenal aircraft were now being flown by young women who were as capable as, you know, the older gentleman with white hair that I was used to. It was a stark change for me.
It is the one of who was that? One of my last flights, we did a representation flight with a female Emirati female first officer. I think we were the same size, which is less than 1.60 meters. You know? And when the people they saw us going out of the plane, you know, she had the view, and we were both of them. You know, I'm blonde, she was brown hair, she was Arabic, I was French, and people they had eyes looking at us, you know, in front of that big plane. Yes, we are both flying, only two of us flying that plane. But now it's getting better. People, they're still surprised, I would say, but they accept it much more than before. You know, when I started on the DCA, that was really, really, really not the case.
And I think we saw recently, was it Air India that did an all-female, it was the longest of their flights, if I'm not mistaken, and it was an all-female crew. And I understand you did something similar when you were in the Middle East.
We did for the International Women's Day. We did a London flight with only female. That was fun. But you know, the ambience, if I can say that, I don't know. But the ambience in the cockpit, only female, it's so relaxed, so relaxed, so relaxed. No competition, and we know what we're talking about. I mean, I would say that it's like intuitive. It's like we don't need to challenge ourselves, like sometimes happening with men, you know. It's just so easy, only women.
So do you think that no matter how much things have changed, men still feel like they have to prove something to you?
Yeah, you know, it's even if we are pilot and we do a job, we are still a male and a female, you know, and this relation will never change, never change. When it comes to a decision, you know, sometimes, so what I mean, they're really nice with me, but I'm still the boss, kind of. Yeah. So when you have to take a decision and we don't both agree on the same, I'm sorry, but I'm the one responsible at the end. So I have to put the points, end on the discussion. And sometimes...
But man or woman, the four stripes mean the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that it's such an impressive machine. But what, in your mind, makes that aircraft? I mean, beyond its size, obviously, is incredible. But what makes the A380 so special to fly?
The technology, I would say. You know, this aircraft, as I flew the 300, 600, the 330, the 340, and now the 380, the technology is getting better and better, you know, the automation, and the 380 is so well done, you know, you just sit, everything is accessible. You don't need to turn around or go there or this or that. Everything is in front of you. Everything is made for you to understand, to get it simple, and it's really well done. And we have a nice table with the keyboard on it.
Does it feel as big to fly as it is?
No, at all, at all. I mean, compared to the 340-600, which was a huge plane to fly, you know, like every time you turn, you have to wait, and then it starts turning. The 380 is so reactive. People say it's like a 320. I never flew the 320. But even compared to the 330, you know, 330 is really a glider. You need to calculate, you know, you don't divide by 3 for the altitude to distance, you divide by 4. But the 380, it's so reactive. It's fantastic to fly, really.
One of the most impressive moments in my career was I got to land in the jump seat on an A330, and what struck me is how such a small input on the stick created this, and it seemed effortless from the pilot's perspective. And I was just so impressed, because I think that we all have this vision of, you know, having to turn this big aircraft, and it should take more effort maybe than it does.
But they corrected it, like I said, compared to the 340, especially the 600. They really improved the plane, the control, I would say.
Would you say the A380 is a complex aircraft?
It's a complex because, like, there's much more fuel tank, there's 4 engines, so everything is multiply. But as it's really, the automation is really good, you kind of, if everything's fine, it's okay. But when you start dealing with the fuel system, you know, if you lose some pump, there is so many pumps, and okay, but anyway, we're trying for that. But no, technically talking, it's nice. It's really nice. They improve every plane, new plane they do. There is improvement of the mistake they did before, so it's good.
What would you say are the biggest challenges to operating an aircraft like the A380?
Oh, the 380 biggest challenge is, of course, the number of passengers. On the route I was doing, because we are flying a lot over the ocean, so far away, because 4 engine were not under the ATOPS rules, so we are quite far away from any airport sometimes. And as UAE was a hub, people did travel before getting to UAE and travel again. And they use this aircraft to do ultra long range, which is flights above 12 hours, I would say. And with 500 passengers, we had 500 passengers inside. There's always some, it's like a small village, you know. There's always a problem somewhere.
Also, the number of cabin crew you must have. Like, you're not dealing with a small crew here. You're, you know.
No. It's a minimum of 18, and usually we have 21 cabin crew on board.
Wow.
That's a lot.
I thought you might talk about the size of the aircraft being a challenge, especially when taxiing. You know, we see the new 777 is going to have folding wings.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's times where you wished you had those too.
Especially, you know, some airport like London, you have to, if you parallel those taxiway where you go and take runway 09, you have to separate. If there is a 747 on the parallel taxiway, you cannot go. But we don't see the wingtip. That's the problem, you know. We have cameras above, under, on the side, everything, but not for the wingtips. So sometimes you're already like, oops.
It must be nice, though, to be the king of the airport as you're taxiing.
Yes.
Or the queen, I should say. I would have said the queen, but I think that the queen is reserved for the 747. So we always say the queen of the sky. So that's why I say the king. What do you think passengers liked most about the A380?
What they are saying, all of them, is that the treat is really quiet, comfortable, and they feel space, you know. Then the cabin is depending on the company, of course, the space between the seats and everything. But because it's a large aircraft, you know, especially when you board, you see it from outside, then inside it's large as well. So they don't feel oppressed, you know, they really like that. And apparently really quiet.
And I think that it had a lot of firsts in aviation, especially if we talk in the Middle East, for the Middle Eastern market, you know, with mini apartments and showers and all of these amenities that really probably before were reserved for private jets that we were now finding on commercial airlines.
Yeah. My ex-company, we had the full top was 70 seats for business class, 9 apartments, and we had the residence. A private shower for the residents and a shower for the first class. That's kind of nice, but they're still flying with the 400 passenger below. You know? So if we have to divert for somebody, we divert for everybody.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
So here's one of my last questions to you. Is we often see these great amenities and, you know, a residence and all this kind of stuff, but were those always full?
Business class full all the time. First class, I would say most of the time full. Residence was quite, actually, I was surprised. People are flying, you know, on 14 hours flight. It's, if you have the money, you put it in there because you have a special butler for you. Service is really different. Like I said, the only problem is if there's a diversion for somebody, he's going on the diversion as well. But the service, it's really worth for 14 hours flight, I would say.
Having worked in both airline and business aviation, I worked in marketing and business aviation, and I often wondered what's the line between that kind of service and, you know, your own, you know, taking a private jet, which cost is now less of a factor, right? So I was just wondering, it's personal information. We usually at the very, very beginning ask about what is, but we jumped into things, so it doesn't matter, but what would you say is your top aviation memory, the thing in your mind that you say is probably like the best moment in aviation for you?
Something I will never, ever forget is the first time I landed in Sydney. That was early morning local time, 6 o'clock, the sun just rise. And after kind of 14 hours flight, I was at the end of the world for me. And, you know, Sydney is just at the edge. And that approach was gorgeous, you know, sunrise. And I'm like, I cannot go. Okay, you can go further, you know, to New Zealand or something. But because Australia is such a big land, you know, and I was at the, for me, I traveled around the world at this time, but then we have to land because we cannot go. That's an amazing, and as well, another one was my first transatlantic flight, actually. We positioned to Los Angeles, but we came back operating Los Angeles, Brussels, and we took off from Los Angeles. We had the sunset over the Grand Canyon. Then we had all northern lights over Canada. And then we had the sunrise over Greenland. Oh. And for me, I said, okay, I can stop now. I've seen the most beautiful thing on earth. Gorgeous.
But it's funny, if I think of all the flights I've done, some of the nicest scenery is actually Greenland and Iceland. There's something about it that there's not, in theory, there's not much to see, yet it's just breathtaking.
yeah, I mean, when you see the iceberg and in the middle of the land, you see those blue, really light blue lakes. I mean, you see so much thing from up there. It's some mines over Australia, and they are the shape of a heart. Uh, oh, I, flying over the ocean, you know, every little cumulus. Under the cumulus was a rainbow. So there was hundreds of little rainbow over the sea.
Oh, wow.
And you cannot explain. You have to see that. You know, when you explain that to people, they say, okay, that's nice, you know, but when you see it, it's wow. Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic.
I know that you've been impacted by COVID-19 and that right now you're not flying. And I don't want to end on a sad note just because your positivity about flying and the A380 and everything in general is just is infectious. Like it's, I think you're both inspirational and just a breath of fresh air in terms of your spirit. And I have no doubt that you'll be back in the flight deck sooner rather than later. And normally we ask people, oh, what advice do you have for people who are currently, looking for their job? But you're in a bit of a different case because you are currently looking for a role or for a pilot job. What are you doing to sort of maintain your positivity and to what are you doing to try and find your next pilot job?
If I can summarize, actually, I lost my job last summer in July. In the beginning, I was really surprised, really surprised that myself lost a job as a pilot. Not that the A380 was not flying anymore. No passenger, of course, the A380 was grounded. I had to leave the UAE, go back to my country, and try to think what I'm going to do with my life. If it doesn't start, that's the only thing I can do, and the only thing I do well, actually. And after a few months, you realize that this is not our fault as pilot. This is the situation. And when I tell people I'm an ex-pilot, they say, no, you are a pilot, and I am a pilot. And after months, I accepted it. So I'm just a pilot on standby. That's the way I express it. Which is good as well. If you can take the positive side, everything I couldn't do when I was flying, because you have commitment. I'm doing it now. I'm doing sports, I'm reading, I'm taking a nap. I'm enjoying myself the time. Anyway, I cannot do anything. We cannot do anything. Vaccine is coming, so hope is coming back. What I said to a friend of mine who just got fired, I had the discussion 3 days ago, and he said, I'm really down. I don't know if it's going to come again. I said, you know what we've been, what we've seen, what we felt, nobody, nothing, any situation can take that away. So you're still free, you're still in your mind, the memories are there, and you should see the bright side of it, because that will be there forever.
And I think that those are the perfect words to end on. I think that you've, as I've said, I think that what you've achieved and the example you've set and the role model you are to little girls everywhere, to me, is completely inspiring. And I'm so happy we had the opportunity to speak to you. And I hope that someone, we always do things and we don't know why sometimes, but my hope for you is that someone sees it and says, that's the person we need at our airline. And as I say, I'm sure you'll be flying before you know it. Thank you so much, Sophie. It was phenomenal to talk to you. Thank you so much. And I'll just remind everybody, and maybe you too, Sophie, that go to airside.aero. Lots of great resources and information and jobs board and all sorts of stuff for pilots who are looking for their next opportunity. Thanks again, Sophie. Take care. Bye.
CAE Pilot Podcast is brought to you by CAE, the global leader in training for the civil aviation, defense and security, and healthcare markets. For more information, check out cae.com.